"His vitals are dropping," someone yelled, but the words barely registered over the pounding of Amara's heart. The hallway lights smeared into streaks as she ran beside the stretcher, refusing to let go. She climbed onto it mid-motion, pressing her trembling hands to his chest, desperation clawing at her voice. The emergency room doors of Daehan Central Hospital had burst inward that night, sacrificing their silence to the rain-soaked night. It was past midnight, and the air immediately filled with the harsh, mechanical clatter of the arriving stretcher and the frantic shouts of paramedics in urgent Korean. Amara Okoye, a young Nigerian intern doctor, pushed a stray curl of hair from her exhausted face. She'd been on her feet for nearly 30 hours, fueled by lukewarm coffee and sheer will, but she didn't hesitate. She rushed to meet the incoming trauma. "Vitals are dropping. Severe internal bleeding suspected," a paramedic yelled. The man on the stretcher was unconscious, bloodied, and unnervingly still. He wore an expensive, custom-tailored suit that was now ruined, and a heavy, foreign-looking tattoo was visible on his neck. His features, even under the grim mask of injury, were aristocratic and severe. A massive gold watch glinted faintly on his wrist. He was not a random patient. "Prepare for immediate surgical attention," Amara commanded, her voice cutting through the noise with the authority her 24 years barely afforded her. She didn't wait. As the gurney rolled, she hopped onto it, straddling the patient's legs. Her palms found the center of his chest, and she began the rhythmic life-and-death press of compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Don't you dare die on me," she whispered fiercely, her breath ragged. "Stay awake. Fight. You have to fight." A tear, hot and heavy from fatigue, desperation, and the immediate, overwhelming fear of losing a patient, escaped her eye. It traced a brief, warm path down the man's temple and landed, precisely, on the edge of his pale, slightly parted lips. In that fleeting fraction of a second, before the darkness fully claimed him, Han Jun-suk's eyes fluttered open. He saw only a blur of dark skin, a panicked but determined face, and the flash of a tear. The very last image he registered before losing consciousness completely. Amara didn't know the name yet, but the presence of this man, Jun-suk, the most feared, ruthless mafia boss in all of South Korea, would soon define the whole trajectory of her precarious life. The accident that had nearly killed him, she would later learn, was anything but. 3 days later, the air in Daehan Central Hospital's private recovery wing was thick with silence and strange tension. The man, now identified only by the name Han Jun-suk, though no official records or police reports seemed to exist, had survived. He was recovering quietly in a lavish suite guarded by 2 massive, unsmiling men in dark suits who never moved from the door. Amara's life, meanwhile, continued its downhill slide. She dragged herself through another double shift, the weight of her reality crushing her. The debt from her mother's sudden illness back in Nigeria was crippling. The eviction notice for her tiny Seoul apartment was overdue. Her monthly pay as an intern was a cruel joke. She was drowning. On the day of the mystery patient's discharge, Amara was sent to his room to remove his final 4-line and sterilize the space. The room was empty save for the lingering scent of disinfectant and a powerful, musky cologne. She was about to pull the sheets when she noticed something tucked carelessly under the armchair in the corner. It was a thick, supple leather briefcase. She picked it up, her hands already trembling. It was heavy, too heavy. With a cautious click of the latch, the briefcase sprang open, revealing its astonishing contents. Inside, packed so tightly they seemed to breathe, were stacks upon stacks of crisp, new 50,000 won notes, South Korea's highest denomination. It was easily over $100,000. Amara sank onto the edge of the bed, the blood rushing from her head. The briefcase felt searing hot in her lap. This was not just money, it was freedom. It was her mother's surgery. It was paying off the loan sharks who called her every night. It was an escape route back home. No one would ever know. The patient was gone. She was the only one here. She spent the next few hours locked in the hospital supply closet, the briefcase hidden in her backpack, curled into a ball as silent, wrenching sobs shook her body. The sheer, overwhelming temptation was a physical pain. Every logical, despairing part of her mind screamed, "Take it. Save yourself." But a deeper, more profound voice, the one that had made her a doctor, the one that had whispered, "Don't you dare die on me," to a stranger, refused to be silenced. Her integrity, the one thing she still owned, was a precious, fragile thing. She couldn't buy her future with a lie. With a heart pounding a desperate rhythm against her ribs, she retrieved the patient's file. There was a single emergency contact number. Her voice barely a rasp, she dialed. "Hello, I'm Dr. Okoye from Daeon Central. I believe the patient, Han Jun-suk, accidentally left a briefcase behind." She didn't have to wait long. Minutes later, the hospital driveway was lined with a convoy of black, bulletproof SUVs. The sheer display of wealth and controlled power made the hospital staff shrink back against the walls, whispering nervously. The rear door of the lead car opened, and Han Jun-suk stepped out. He was no longer the wounded, pale man she had fought to save. He was healthy, formidable, and terrifyingly powerful. He wore an immaculate charcoal suit that seemed tailored to highlight his sheer, commanding presence. His gaze was sharp and utterly unreadable. He walked past the bowing hospital director and the nervous security guards, stopping directly in front of Amara, who stood clutching the briefcase. "Dr. Okoye," he said, his voice deep and smooth with a distinct cold edge. It was the first time she'd heard him speak. "Mr. Han, you forgot this." She held out the briefcase, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. He didn't take it. His eyes, the color of dark, polished stone, locked onto hers. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched his lips. "You could have taken it, doctor," he stated, his voice a low challenge. "No one would have stopped you. A young, foreign intern deep in debt, the temptation must have been excruciating." Amara swallowed hard, forcing herself to hold his gaze. "It wasn't mine, Mr. Han, and I'm a doctor, not a thief." His smirk widened slightly, but his eyes remained utterly cold. He took the briefcase from her and placed it on the nearest counter with a soft thud. He didn't even bother to open it. "Good," he murmured, leaning closer, his powerful scent of expensive cologne and danger washing over her. "Because it wasn't money, doctor. It was a test." Amara's mind reeled. "A test? I wanted to see if greed could buy your soul," he continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "It couldn't. So now, I want to buy your time instead." He signaled to one of his men. "Take the doctor to the rooftop. We have things to discuss." The hospital rooftop was deserted, the night air cool and crisp. It felt a million miles away from the chaos of the emergency room. Jun-suk was different up here. The charisma he projected was polite, almost gentle, a subtle, unnerving transformation from the terrifying man downstairs. "My son Min-ho," he began, looking out over the glittering sprawl of Seoul. "He is 6 years old. He has severe developmental anxiety and selective mutism. He hasn't spoken a full sentence to me in over a year." He turned, his face softened by what Amara realized was a genuine, though rigidly controlled, flicker of paternal concern. "He needs someone who is patient, someone trustworthy, someone who, when tested with a briefcase full of money, gives it back." His eyes drilled into hers. "He needs you, Dr. Okoye." He laid out the terms of a contract that sounded too fantastical to be real. "You will become his live-in personal physician. You will move into my home on the outskirts of Seoul. Every single one of your bills, your rent, your student loans, your mother's hospital expenses back in Nigeria, will be paid in full. Immediately. Furthermore, I will personally guarantee your permanent residency in this country." Amara's breath hitched. She was listening to a miracle. The weight of her crushing reality seemed to lift instantly. "What is the catch, Mr. Han?" she asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. He smiled, a true, disarmingly handsome smile this time. "The catch is simple, doctor. You belong to Min-ho. You are on call 24/7. Your sole focus is his health and well-being. And you sign a non-disclosure agreement that forbids you from ever speaking of my home or my family to the outside world." He paused. "In return, you get your life back." Amara's mind raced. It was the chance to finally breathe, to save her family, to achieve her dreams without constant fear. It felt like salvation. "The offer seems unbelievable, Mr. Han," Amara said, her voice strained. She gripped the railing, kneading the solid metal beneath her fingers to keep from swaying. "It is a massive change. I would be leaving my career trajectory, moving my entire life. I need time to process this, to think it over." Han Jun-suk's smile vanished, leaving his expression perfectly neutral, yet immensely powerful. He seemed mildly amused by her request for agency. "Time is a luxury, Dr. Okoye, and one that I rarely afford to others," he said, stepping closer. "But I admire that you're not easily bought. I respect caution. You have proven yourself to be a woman of integrity, and for my son, I require nothing less than certainty." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek, black business card. The the kind with barely visible raised lettering. It was the same simple card that contained the emergency contact number she had used to report the money. "You already know how to contact me," he said, pressing the card into her palm. "You have 24 hours. After that, the offer, with all its guarantees, disappears. You can go back to your life, your loans, your two-bedroom flat, and the fear of deportation. The choice is entirely yours." He didn't wait for a reply. He simply turned, his security detail falling into perfect formation behind him, and descended to the waiting black SUV, leaving Amara alone on the rooftop, clutching the key to a gilded cage. Amara spent the next 20 hours walking the streets of Seoul, utterly paralyzed. She knew signing the contract meant trading one form of slavery for another, but the alternative was ruin. She was on the verge of calling him back, defeated, when her remaining balance in her bank account hit zero. Her debit card was declined at a convenience store. She hadn't eaten properly in days. Just as she was walking into her tiny, overdue apartment, ready to collapse, her phone rang. It was her younger sister, Kemi, calling from Lagos. "Amara, you have to answer." Kemi sobbed. "I went to the hospital this morning. They said Mama is deteriorating fast. The bleeding is worse." Amara's blood ran cold. "Kemi, tell me exactly what the doctor said." They said she needs the emergency surgery now," her sister choked out. "They gave us a written notice, Amara. They said if the operation isn't performed within the next 72 hours, 3 days, she won't survive. They've stopped the palliative care until we pay the outstanding amount and a huge deposit for the surgery." The world tilted. 72 hours. Her mother's life. The debt. The eviction. Everything crashed down on her at once. She sank to the floor, the briefcase of money she'd returned flashing in her mind. She had fought so hard for her integrity, but faced with the immediate, cold reality of her mother's death, that integrity seemed like a foolish luxury. It was no longer about her future. It was about preventing a tragedy that was already in motion. Trembling, her fingers fumbled for the sleek black card. The time for caution was over. There was only one option left. She was no longer signing a work contract. She was selling her soul for 72 hours of hope. She dialed the number. "I accept the contract, Mr. Han," she whispered into the phone, her voice broken, sealing her fate. "Send the papers." The papers arrived within the hour, delivered by a silent man who watched as she read the long, legally airtight document. She saw the clauses, the non-disclosure, the 24/7 call, the indefinite term, but the legal jargon meant nothing. The only phrase that mattered was, "All existing debt erased." Surgery wire transferred immediately. She was no longer hesitant. She was just defeated. She took the pen, signed her full name with a hand that barely trembled, and pushed the contract back across the table. "When do I start?" she asked, her voice hollow. Jun-suk's assistant didn't even look at the signature. "Now, doctor. You'll be home by morning." Amara arrived at the Han family estate the next day with 2 small suitcases, driven by one of the black-suited men. The complex was not a house, it was a fortress. High, impenetrable walls, thick gates, and guards posted at every corner. The opulence was staggering, but it was the silent, unnerving scale of the place that chilled her. She was met by a stern, unsmiling elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Choi, who walked her through the silent, echoing hallways. "You will adhere to the rules, doctor," Mrs. Choi intoned, her voice dry as parchment. "No personal phone calls after 9 p.m. Never, under any circumstances, enter the East Wing. Never, ever, speak to Mr. Han's guests unless you are directly addressed. You are here for the young master, and the young master only." The first meeting with her patient was a silent confrontation. 6-year-old Minho was a small, fragile boy with enormous, terrified dark eyes. He didn't speak when Amara gently introduced herself. He merely hid behind a heavy, antique doorframe, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit, watching her with profound suspicion. The true atmosphere of the estate descended like a physical weight that evening at dinner. Amara was given a seat far down the massive table, where she ate in silence with the other staff. The moment Jun-suk entered the dining room, the room became utterly still. Every single person in the room, staff, and even the few other stern men who seemed to be associates, stood instantly. The charm he'd exhibited on the rooftop was gone. This was the kingpin, the Jeondal, and his presence was heavy, suffocatingly commanding. During the meal, Minho, seated rigidly beside his father, accidentally knocked his water glass over. It shattered softly on the floor. The boy flinched so violently he almost fell from his chair. His eyes instantly filled with tears, not from shock, but from sheer terror. Jun-suk didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply lowered his fork and stared at the boy with cold, uncompromising silence. The gaze alone was enough. Minho burst into silent, heartbreaking tears, his body shaking uncontrollably. It was Amara's first true moment of clarity. This wasn't kindness that had brought her here. This was control. This wasn't a medical problem. The child's fear was psychological. She hadn't stepped into an opportunity. She'd stepped into a gilded, high-security cage. Days bled into weeks. Amara established a quiet, comforting routine with Minho. She didn't press him to speak. Instead, she used soft music, gentle art therapy, and medical play to draw him out. She learned that behind the fear was a bright, deeply lonely little boy. She was the only splash of warmth and color in his silent, cold world. One afternoon, as they sat coloring in the sun-dappled garden, Minho leaned close. "My fish died," he whispered, so softly Amara almost missed it. It was his first voluntary sentence. It was a victory. "Oh, sweetie," she replied, her heart swelling. "I'm so sorry. What was his name?" Minho's face clouded again. "I didn't like Daddy," he whispered, clutching her hand. "Daddy makes bad people disappear." Amara paused, her heart now pounding for a different reason. "What do you mean, Minho?" He shrank back. "If I cry too much, the guards take me away." Amara gently pulled him into a hug, her mind racing. The gentle, concerned father she'd met on the rooftop was a carefully constructed mask. The real man was a monster, and his empire was built on blood and absolute fear. Minho was the emotional heart of this story, and that heart was broken by his own father. She started seeing signs everywhere. Hushed midnight meetings in the East Wing. The way the staff, especially the security guards, had fresh bruises and cuts one morning after making a mistake. The palpable, collective relief that washed over the household the moment Jun-suk's car pulled out of the driveway. One night, the shouting woke her. It was past 3 a.m. Amara cautiously opened her door, unable to ignore the rising, angry torrent of Korean. She crept down the long hall, drawn by the noise to the foyer. She froze behind a marble column, a gasp dying in her throat. Jun-suk stood over a man, one of his own mid-level associates, who was curled on the floor, bleeding profusely from a shattered nose. Jun-suk's face was unrecognizable in its cold fury. He was holding a golf club, and the heavy, sickening thwack of the metal meeting flesh echoed through the silent mansion. "This is what betrayal costs." Jun-suk's voice was cold, almost conversational, yet infinitely more terrifying than a shout. "You thought you could skim from my accounts? You thought I wouldn't notice a few million one missing? Now you lose a little more than that." The man was dragged away, whimpering. Jun-suk stood for a moment, straightening his expensive silk dressing gown, his breathing ragged. Then slowly he looked up. His eyes, ice-cold and utterly vacant of remorse, locked onto Amara's terrified face peering from behind the column. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, his expression revealing nothing. The next morning, her personal cell phone was gone. The stern housekeeper, Mrs. Choi, handed her a small, pristine flip phone for emergency use only. Later that day, Amara checked her small personal bank account on the estate computer. It was stuffed with money, the promised payment for her mother, the loan debt erased, and a massive, unbelievable salary deposit. The message was clear, delivered with chilling, terrifying precision. She was no longer an employee. She was owned now. The chains began to tighten. She was shadowed by a silent guard every time she stepped outside the compound. Her medical credentials had been temporarily suspended for her own security. She was becoming a prisoner. She considered leaving, running, but she overheard the staff whispering. No one resigns from working for Mr. Han. If she left, she wouldn't just lose the money, she would disappear. And she would leave Minho behind. She found Jun-suk waiting for her one evening in the garden, sitting on a wrought iron bench after Minho's evening session. He looked less formidable in the gathering dusk, almost thoughtful. "You're a remarkable doctor, Amara," he said, using her first name for the first time. The casual intimacy felt invasive. Minho spoke a complete sentence today. It was about how you drew a funny nose on his teddy bear. "He's a remarkable boy, Mr. Han," Amara replied quietly, trying to keep her fear hidden. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, staring at the ground. "You think I'm a monster," he stated flatly. Amara looked at the powerful, dangerous man next to her. She thought of Minho's fear, the battered man in the foyer, and the velvet bars of her gilded cage. "I think you're lonely," she said softly, surprised by her own honesty. And I think that kind of loneliness is terrifying. You surround yourself with guards, but you trust no one. Jun-suk's head snapped up. His eyes narrowed, searching her face. He didn't smile, but a strange, dark intensity pulsed from him. You returned my money, he murmured, his voice low and hypnotic. Now I'm asking for something more valuable, your complete, unquestioning loyalty. He rose and stood close to her, his shadow enveloping her. The accident wasn't random, Doctor. It was my own blood, my own family, trying to remove me from power. They know Min-ho is my only weakness, and now that you've managed to gain his trust, you've become his shield. He reached out, his finger tracing the line of her jaw, a possessive, chilling gesture. I can't afford to let you walk away, Amara. You know too much, and you mean too much to the one person I can't live without. This isn't employment, is it? She whispered, the horrifying truth finally settling. This is captivity. He smiled, a chilling, predatory display. Good. Stay that way. Monsters don't hurt the people they care about. And for now, you are the most valuable person in this house. The final scene of that night was the beginning of her fight. As Amara tucked Min-ho into bed, she heard muffled, angry arguing downstairs in the main hall. She didn't have to follow the noise this time. A name, her name, cut through the Korean. She pressed her ear to the air vent. She is a threat, one man's voice hissed. She is a foreigner, and she is getting too close to the air. The boss is starting to trust her too much. He won't let her go, the second voice replied, resigned. The Han family never cuts a loose end. They just bury it. Amara backed away from the vent, her entire body shaking, confirming everything she had feared. Her life was no longer her own. She was caught in the cold, ruthless mechanism of the Han syndicate. Later that night, as she lay awake, terrified, something slid under her door. A piece of crumpled paper. She picked it up, her hands clammy. Scrawled across it in broken, desperate Korean was a single, chilling message. Leave while you still can. She didn't know who had sent it. But when she peered out her window, the vast, opulent courtyard was still. The mansion gates, the keys to her freedom, were locked tight. Her passport was gone. And she knew with a sickening certainty that the silent, unblinking eyes of the security cameras were now fixed only on her. The nightmare was just beginning. She thought she was saving a child. She didn't know she was saving herself from the man who now owned her fate. She returned his money, only to become his most precious and most endangered possession. Now the doctor is the patient, and her heart is the cure.